and welcome to today's episode of The Lovable Madman. Superman and Lois just finished airing its first season, and it's drawn a few comparisons to another show featuring the Big Blue Boy Scout, Smallville. I watch Superman and Lois every week as the episodes aired, and over the last few months I've been working my way through Smallville, and I thought today it would be interesting to share my thoughts on both shows and how they kind of compare. A quick disclaimer on the Smallville side of things. As of this video being posted, I am currently working my way through season 6, so I have not completely finished all of Smallville. I have read ahead on some things that happen in later seasons, and even though I haven't finished the series, I feel 125 or so episodes is a decent enough sample size. There will also be spoilers for both of the series coming up. The first and most obvious point of comparison is that of the main man himself, Clark Kent. When Smallville starts, Clark is just entering into high school and already has control over his super strength and his speed. He's close with his parents and has a couple of friends in the forms of Pete and Chloe, as well as an unrequited crush on Lana. As the series progresses, he gains new abilities, gets new friends and allies, and learns the truth behind his alien heritage. At the beginning of the series, Clark is very reactionary when using his powers, and doesn't really seem to want to work with others, something that Oliver eventually calls him out on. In the later seasons, he becomes a much more active hero, working with the show's version of the Justice League and taking on the moniker of the Blur. He even takes on larger and badder threats, such as Brainiac, Doomsday, and eventually even Darkseid. The Clark we meet in Superman and Lois is far more experienced, having been a hero for nearly 20 years. He has full control over all of his abilities and has saved the world multiple times. He also doesn't have an issue working with others, as he teams up with Supergirl and the other Arrowverse heroes. He's worked with Batman in the past and has been working with the U.S. Army for years. This Clark is also the father to 2 teenage boys. He chose to keep his life as Superman a secret from his sons, so much so that with him constantly flying off to go save the world, made them think he was just a terrible absentee father. The early part of the season spends a good chunk of its runtime rebuilding this relationship, having Clark become the boys' assistant football coach and mentoring Jordan when his powers start to develop. The biggest difference between these two Clarks is where they're at in their lives during their respective series. Another major character in both series is Lois Lane. When she's introduced in Smallville, it's as Chloe's cousin, and when she comes across a mystery, she won't stop until she gets her answer. She starts the series without really any kind of goal in life, but eventually decides to fulfill her destiny and become a reporter. This version of Lois is very intelligent, but she's also impulsive and reckless, and finds herself in situations she doesn't really have a way out of. In Superman and Lois, she is much more experienced. She has that same kind of fire and tenacity that the Smallville version does, but none of the impulsiveness or recklessness to go along with it. She enters most situations with some sort of a plan, instead of just going in blind. In Smallville, she and Clark can't stand each other for quite a while in Superman and Lois, it was love at first sight. The final character with major presence in both series is Lana Lang. In Smallville, she's the often ignored love interest of Clark. He has to constantly lie to her and leave her behind in order to keep his secret from her. This leaves her to spend most of the series isolated and angry, and understandably so, but it unfortunately restricts her growth as a character. She does leave Clark and move on to Lex, who also constantly lies to her, causing her to leave him as well. She does learn about Clark's secret, and the two of them get back together. She gains superpowers of her own, and eventually has to leave Clark after she absorbs a bunch of kryptonite into her body. Hopefully that last part makes sense once I actually get to those episodes. In Superman and Lois, Lana and Clark did date when they were in high school, but broke up when he left Smallville. She did eventually get married and have 2 kids of her own. She still winds up in a somewhat neglectful relationship, but not because her husband lies to her about everything. Instead, he's just kind of a douche. However, she does get that arc that Smallville so often denied the character. She's able to rebuild her relationship with her husband and find happiness with her family. Jordan and Jonathan don't have any direct counterparts in Smallville. However, I think their stories parallel that of Clark and Chloe pretty interestingly. Jordan begins his show very similar to Clark and is actually a better point of comparison than his father is. They're both just entering high school and they're both kind of isolated and picked on. And while Clark does know about a couple of his powers and Jordan doesn't know about any, when a new one starts to manifest, it doesn't really work out well for either one, especially at first. Jonathan and Chloe may not have a whole lot in common, especially on the surface. However, their stories parallel in that they're the unpowered character that grounds the powered individual. They're the ones that Jordan and Clark trust more than anyone else and will go to for anything. And they're both willing to just jump in and help in any way that they can. The two shows do have several similarities, but they're also very different. And part of that has to do with when each show aired. Smallville has a much more serialized format, with most episodes featuring a freak of the week, while Superman and Lois tells its story over the course of an entire season. And yes, Smallville does introduce multi-episode arcs relating to characters and plot lines. Most episodes stand on their own, and most issues are resolved in the episode they're introduced. It wasn't until season 4 that Smallville finally introduced a season-long villain. And while subsequent seasons also introduced season-long storylines, most episodes stand on their own and don't tie into the larger narrative. Contrasted with Superman and Lois, I can't think of a weekly plot or a villain that doesn't tie in directly with Morgan Edge. When Smallville debuted, adaptions of comic books and live-action superheroes weren't given the same amount of respect that they have today. And people will point to various movies that they say helped change that perception in the public conscience. I think Smallville deserves a good chunk of that credit as well, especially on the TV side of things. Before Smallville aired, most adaptions of live-action superheroes only lasted 2 or 3 seasons. The only one I can think of that lasted longer was Power Rangers. And if you know of any, please tell me about it in the comments. Superman and Lois and Smallville both have very different in-universe histories, and nothing on their respective timelines really line up. The shows have very different formats and their own unique feel to them, but Superman and Lois is very much the spiritual successor to Smallville. The thing that both of these shows just get right is the core of who Clark Kent really is. That you can also adapt a successful Superman story to the screen about something as epic as saving the world to something as small as just helping one little boy. Superman isn't just someone who puts on a red cape and flies around and saves people. What people who say they don't like Superman often forget is that the most important part of his character is who he was before that. The part of him that is Clark Kent, an orphan raised in the heartland of America, who was taught to be humble and respectful despite his great power, who would do anything to protect those that he cares about. Despite being an alien, he makes mistakes and has very human flaws that have grounded him and made him relatable in the most popular comic book character for more than 80 years. What did you think of these two series? How would you compare them either to each other or to another Superman property? Or should they even be compared at all? Leave any thoughts you have in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, and if you want to see more from me, be sure to subscribe. Today's trivia: Tom Welling was born in 1977 and his Clark Kent in 1987. Tyler Hoechlin was born in 1987 and his Clark Kent in 1979. Thank you all for watching. And remember, we're all mad.